Welcome. Tonight, we leave the frantic pace of the modern world behind to embark on a journey across time and landscape. You are about to experience the story of a continent, not through dates and facts, but through the rhythmic pulse of the land itself. As you settle into your rest, imagine yourself drifting above a vast, untamed horizon. We are going to witness the rise of a nation, from the ancient blue-misted peaks of the Appalachians to the sun-drenched red rocks of the Grand Canyon, from the rhythmic clatter of the first steam engines to the silent digital glow of the future. We will explore the American story in 24 chapters of resilience, transformation, and beauty. Lower the lights, find your most comfortable position, take a deep, slow breath, and let the tension leave your body. You are safe, you are still, and the journey is about to begin. Close your eyes now, as we travel back to the very first breath of the land.
The primeval cradle and the whispers of the land. Take a deep breath. Let the weight of the day settle into the mattress beneath you. Imagine yourself drifting away from the neon lights and the hum of modern life, traveling back to a time when the North American continent was a silent, sprawling masterpiece of nature. Before the first skyscrapers pierced the clouds, and before the rhythmic clatter of industry began, there was the land. This is the foundation of the American story, a geographical giant waking up under an ancient sun. To the west, the Rocky Mountains stood as jagged sentinels, their peaks dusted with eternal snow, catching the first light of dawn. These mountains weren't just scenery, they were the architects of the climate, catching the moisture from the Pacific and sending it cascading down in crystal-clear streams. Imagine the Great Plains. In your mind's eye, see a sea of golden green grass stretching toward an infinite horizon. There were no fences here, no roads, only the soft sigh of the wind through the tall grass prairie. This was the heart of the continent, a vast basin of fertility that would one day become the breadbasket of the world. The soil here was deep and dark, enriched over millennia, waiting silently for its role in the global economy. To the east, the Appalachian Mountains offered a softer, older silhouette. These mountains, worn down by eons of wind and rain, were covered in dense, ancient forests of oak, maple, and pine. The air here was cool and damp, smelling of moss and damp earth. Within these hills lay the hidden wealth of the future, veins of coal and iron that would eventually spark the fire of the Industrial Revolution. Flowing through the center of it all was the Mississippi River. Visualize its slow, powerful curves. It was the Great Vein, a natural highway of silver water connecting the frozen north to the warm, humid Gulf of Mexico. Long before the first dollar was minted, the river was the original currency of the land, providing life, transport, and a sense of direction to the early inhabitants. The early economy of this land was one of perfect balance. The indigenous peoples, the First Nations, lived in a rhythm dictated by the seasons. Their wealth was measured in the migration of the bison, the harvest of maize, and the abundance of the salmon runs. There was no concept of growth in a modern sense, only sustenance and respect. The rise and fall of their civilizations were tied strictly to the cycles of the earth. But change was whispering on the Atlantic breezes. Far across the ocean, a different kind of hunger was growing, a hunger for gold, for land, and for a new beginning. The geography of the East Coast, with its deep water harbors and sheltered bays like the Chesapeake and the Massachusetts Bay, was about to become the doorway to a new era. As the sun sets over this primeval landscape in your mind, feel the stillness of the woods and the vastness of the plains. The stage is set, the mountains are waiting, the rivers are flowing. The story of a nation is about to breathe its first breath. Sleep now, knowing that the land remains steady and timeless beneath the feet of history. The horizon's call and the seeds of a new world. As you drift deeper into relaxation, imagine the salty mist of the Atlantic Ocean. The year is 1607, then 1620, and the rhythmic sound of waves crashing against wooden hulls becomes the heartbeat of a changing continent. The vast, silent wilderness we explored in the first chapter is about to meet a new kind of ambition. Visualize the jagged coastline of New England. It is a land of granite and thick timber. For the settlers stepping off the Mayflower, the geography was harsh, but it offered a different kind of wealth. The soil was rocky, stubborn to the plow, but the sea was a silver mine. The cold, nutrient-rich waters of the North Atlantic teemed with cod. This was the birth of the first American industry, the great fisheries. Imagine the quiet docks of Gloucester and Salem, where the smell of salt air and drying wood filled the breeze. Here, the economy was built on resilience, on the harvesting of the sea and the felling of massive white pines for the masts of ships that would eventually sail the globe. Further south, the landscape softens. Picture the wide, tidal rivers of Virginia and the Carolinas. The Chesapeake Bay stretches out like a giant blue hand reaching into the earth. Here, the soil was deep, dark, and loamy. The climate was humid, the summers long and golden. This geography gave birth to a different economic engine, the plantation. In this quiet moment, see the vast fields of tobacco, the brown gold of the 17th century. It was a crop that demanded much from the land and much from the people who tended it. This era saw the first great economic boom, but it also sowed the seeds of a complex and difficult social history. The rise of the tobacco trade turned the colonies from struggling outposts into vital cogs of the British Empire. Ships laden with leaves sailed east, while ships carrying manufactured goods, tea, and glass sailed west. The 13 colonies were like a string of pearls along the Atlantic coast, each unique. In the middle colonies, Pennsylvania and New York, the geography offered a balance. The bread colonies grew wheat and grain in the valleys of the Susquehanna and the Delaware. Imagine the slow, rhythmic turning of the water wheels in the flour mills, a peaceful sound that signaled the beginning of American commerce. Philadelphia and New York City began as small, muddy outposts, but their deep harbors were destined for greatness. Think of the quiet clatter of horse-drawn carts on cobblestone streets, the flickering lanterns in the windows of counting houses, and the soft rustle of ledger pages. This was the infancy of the American market, a time of bartering, of early currencies, and of a growing sense of self-reliance. But as the colonies prospered, a tension began to rise, as steady as the incoming tide. The vast Appalachian Mountains to the west acted as a natural barrier, a giant wall of green that the British Crown forbade the settlers to cross. This proclamation line was more than a map marking, it was a cage. The growing population felt the squeeze. The land was calling them westward, toward the Ohio River Valley, toward the unknown. The economy was no longer just about survival, it was about the right to expand, the right to trade freely, and the right to own the fruits of one's labor. The peaceful rustle of the forest was soon joined by the whispered words of revolution in candlelit taverns. The geography of the colonies had shaped their character, the rugged independence of the North, the agricultural power of the South, and the commercial spirit of the Middle. As you feel your breath slowing down, imagine the sun setting over the Blue Ridge Mountains. The frontier is a dark, mysterious shadow to the west, full of promise and peril. The colonies are no longer just a collection of settlements, they are a coiled spring, ready to leap forward into the pages of history. The air is cool, the stars are bright over the young Atlantic cities, and the continent waits for the spark that will change everything. The forge of liberty and the minting of a nation. As you drift further into the quiet embrace of the night, imagine the flickering glow of a single candle in a window in Philadelphia. The air is thick with the scent of parchment and ink. The year is 1776, and the rhythmic scratching of a quill pen is the only sound in the room. This is the moment a collection of colonies decides to become a sovereign power, a moment where geography and economy collide to spark a revolution. The Revolutionary War was not just a battle of soldiers, it was a struggle for the very soil you are imagining. Visualize the rugged landscape of New England in winter, the biting cold of Valley Forge, where the ground was frozen hard as iron. The soldier's breath hung in the air like ghostly mist. Economically, the young nation was trembling. There was no national bank, no unified currency. Imagine the continental paper money, printed in haste, fluttering in the wind, losing its value as the struggle deepened. It was a time of great risk, a literal debt paid in blood and silver. But as the smoke of the battlefield cleared at Yorktown, a new map began to be drawn. The vast wilderness beyond the Appalachian Mountains was no longer a forbidden zone, it was the public domain. Imagine the Treaty of Paris in 1783, where the stroke of a pen suddenly doubled the size of the new United States, stretching its borders all the way to the mighty Mississippi River. Now visualize the birth of the American financial soul. See a young Alexander Hamilton pacing a wooden floor, his mind a whirlwind of numbers and visions. He understood that a nation without credit is like a ship without a sail. He dreamt of a national bank, a unified federal debt, and a mint that would strike the first silver dollars. Imagine the rhythmic clink, clink, clink of the first coins being stamped in Philadelphia, the sound of stability, the sound of a country finally owning its own future. The economy began to hum with a new, quiet energy. In the north, the first textile mills began to appear along the rushing waterfalls of Rhode Island and Massachusetts. The sound of the water crashing over the stones provided the power for the looms. This was the whisper of the coming industrial age. In the South, the invention of the cotton gin by Eli Whitney changed the geography of labor forever. Imagine the vast white fields of cotton stretching across Georgia and Alabama, a beautiful sight that hid a harsh and complex economic reality of human bondage, which would one day lead to the nation's greatest internal rise and fall. The Federalist era was a time of building foundations. Think of the first census in 1790, a quiet counting of heads from the Maine woods to the Georgia swamps. The country was small, only about 4 million people, but their ambition was as wide as the continent. The post road began to connect the cities, a thin thread of dirt and gravel that allowed letters and news to travel. Imagine a lone rider on horseback galloping through the silent woods at night, carrying the news of a new law or a new market price. As the 18th century faded into the 19th, the United States was no longer a fragile experiment. It was a growing body, its muscles stretching. The Whiskey Rebellion had shown that the central government had the strength to tax, and the Louisiana Purchase was just over the horizon, a peaceful acquisition that would change the map of the world forever. Feel the peace of this growing nation. The foundations are laid, the currency is set, the borders are expanding. The night is still, and the great American experiment is breathing steadily, preparing for its march across the mountains and into the heart of the West. The Golden Purchase and the River's Rhythm. As the night grows deeper and your room feels even more still, imagine the year 1803. A single stroke of a pen in a candlelit office in Paris has just changed the world. For $15 million, less than 3 cents an acre, the United States has acquired the Louisiana Territory. In an instant, the nation has doubled in size. Visualize a map of North America. See the borders of the young country suddenly leaping across the Mississippi River, stretching all the way to the jagged, snow-capped peaks of the Rocky Mountains. This wasn't just land, it was an economic empire of soil, fur, and water. This was the great American desert that was actually a garden of hidden wealth. Now imagine yourself standing on the banks of the Missouri River with Lewis and Clark. Hear the gentle lap of the water against their wooden pirogues. The air is crisp, smelling of pine needles and damp earth. They are the eyes of the nation, peering into a wilderness that felt infinite. They saw vast herds of elk moving like shadows through the mist and felt the immense silence of the Great Plains, a silence so deep it felt like a physical presence. This expansion triggered the first great land boom. Imagine the surveyor's chain clicking as it measured out squares of earth in the Ohio Valley. The government began selling land to pioneers for $2 an acre. This was the birth of the American dream of land ownership, a quiet, steady accumulation of wealth for the common man. People began moving west in rhythmic waves, their wagon wheels creaking in a slow, hypnotic cadence against the dirt tracks. Then came the heartbeat of the era, the steamboat. Imagine the puff, puff, puff of steam engines echoing off the bluffs of the Mississippi. Before the steamboat, the river was a one-way street. You could float down, but coming back up was a grueling struggle against the current. But now, with the invention of Robert Fulton's engine, the river became a two-way highway of commerce. Visualize the great paddle wheels, white and majestic, gliding through the morning fog like floating palaces. They carried bales of cotton, barrels of flour, and the dreams of 1,000 merchants. The levee in New Orleans became the economic heart of the South, a bustling, noisy, yet rhythmic center of trade, where the wealth of the interior met the ships of the world. The economy was no longer just local, it was flowing. The market revolution was beginning. Farmers in the Midwest were no longer just feeding their families, they were feeding the cities of the East and the markets of Europe. The world was shrinking, and the pace of life was picking up, yet it remained tethered to the slow, steady flow of the water. But with this rise came the first whispers of a panic, the Panic of 1819. Imagine the quiet anxiety in a small town as the first banknotes lost their value. It was the nation's first taste of the economic trough that follows a peak. It was a reminder that growth is never a straight line. It is a cycle, like the seasons, or the rising and falling of the river's tide. As you breathe in the cool night air, feel the vastness of this newly opened West. The frontier is no longer a wall, it is a door. The Missouri and the Mississippi are singing a lullaby of movement and trade. The nation is learning to navigate not just the water, but the complex currents of global finance. The stars above the Great Plains are silent and watchful. The mountains are waiting for the next generation of dreamers. The continent is vast, and for now, it is at peace.
The silver ribbon and the iron pulse. As you drift deeper into the quietude of the night, imagine the sound of a shovel striking the earth. The year is 1825, and a miracle of engineering has just been completed, the Erie Canal. This ditch, as some skeptics called it, became the silver ribbon that tied the Atlantic Ocean to the heart of the continent. Visualize the calm, mirrored surface of the canal water. Mules walk slowly along the towpath, their rhythmic hoofbeats, clop, 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 echoing against the stone locks. Before this, moving a ton of wheat from Buffalo to New York City took weeks and cost a fortune. Now it takes days. The geography of the Northeast has been reshaped by human hands. New York City is no longer just a port. It is becoming the Empire City, the undisputed financial capital of the New World. The economy is swelling like a rising tide. Imagine the bustling markets of Manhattan, where the smell of roasted coffee, spices, and fresh timber fills the air. Money is flowing through the canal like water, creating a new class of merchants and a middle class that dreams of comfort and stability. But as the canal boats glide silently, a new sound begins to rumble in the distance, a mechanical heartbeat. It is the iron horse. The first steam locomotives are appearing, puffing black smoke into the blue sky of Maryland and South Carolina. Unlike the canal, the railroad does not care about the direction of the river or the height of the hill. It carves its own path. Imagine the rhythmic chugga-chugga-chugga of the wheels on the iron rails. This is the sound of the world accelerating. The railroad is the ultimate conqueror of geography. It shrinks the vastness of the American landscape, bringing the frontier to the doorstep of the city.
Economically, this is a boom unlike any other. Investors are pouring gold into rail stocks, and towns are springing up wherever the tracks meet the earth. Now, imagine the age of Jackson. The political landscape is as stormy as a summer afternoon on the plains. There is a fierce debate over the second bank of the United States. President Andrew Jackson, a man of the frontier, distrusts the moneyed interests of the East. Visualize the quiet tension in the bank's marble halls as the bank war rages. In 1837, the bubble bursts. The panic of 1837 is like a sudden frost in late spring. Banks close their wooden shutters. Construction on the railroads halts. For a few years, the nation feels a deep, shivering trough in its economic cycle. It is a time of quiet reflection, of families tightening their belts, and of the land reclaiming its silence for a brief moment. But the American spirit is restless. Even in the lean years, the eyes of the nation are turning further west, past the Mississippi, past the Missouri, toward the setting sun. The Oregon Trail is being carved into the dirt by thousands of wagon wheels. Imagine the campfire smoke rising into the vast, starlit sky of the Nebraska Territory. People are trading this security for a chance at a new life in the fertile valleys of the Pacific Northwest. The geography of the nation is now truly transcontinental in mind, if not yet in fact. The telegraph is beginning to stretch its copper nerves across the woods, allowing thoughts to travel at the speed of light. As you breathe slowly, feel the transition from the slow pace of the mule-drawn boat to the steady, powerful rhythm of the steam engine. The nation is growing up, learning that with great expansion comes great volatility, and with great dreams comes the necessity of a strong foundation. The tracks are laid, the wires are strung. The continent is humming with a new electric energy, waiting for the gold that lies hidden in the mountains of the far west.
The golden fever and the divided house. As you settle into a deeper state of calm, imagine the year 1848. In a quiet valley in Northern California, at a place called Sutter's Mill, a man glimmers something shiny in the cold, clear water of the American River. It is a moment that will send a shockwave through the global economy and redraw the map of the American psyche. Visualize the California gold rush. Thousands of 49ers are leaving their homes, their farms, and their counting houses. Some sail around the treacherous tip of South America. Others trek across the vast, dusty Great Basin. Imagine the rhythmic swish-swish of the gold pan in the freezing mountain streams. This was the ultimate boom, a sudden, chaotic injection of wealth that turned a sleepy frontier into a global destination. San Francisco transformed overnight from a tiny cove into a bustling, foggy metropolis of canvas tents and wooden piers. Economically, this gold provided the capital that the young nation desperately needed. It fueled the construction of steamships and telegraph lines. But geography was also creating a widening chasm. While the West was glistening with gold and the North was humming with the sound of spinning jennies and iron foundries, the South remained tethered to the soil. Imagine the King Cotton era. The South's economy was a singular, powerful engine, but it was built on a foundation of profound injustice. The invention of the telegraph meant that a merchant in Charleston could know the price of cotton in Liverpool within minutes, but this efficiency only deepened the divide. The North was becoming a land of free labor and diverse industry, while the South became more entrenched in its agricultural traditions. The geography of the nation was literally splitting. The 36-degree, 30-minute parallel, the Missouri Compromise line, was a scar across the map. Imagine the quiet tension in the halls of Congress as men like Henry Clay and Daniel Webster tried to compromise with the soul of a nation. The economy of the North wanted protective tariffs to grow its factories. The economy of the South wanted free trade to export its cotton.
It was a clash of two different worlds under one flag. Then came the Panic of 1857. It was a sharp, cold economic trough. A major bank failed, and the Ohio Life Insurance and Trust Company collapsed. In the North, factories fell silent, and workers stood in long lines for bread. But in the South, the price of cotton remained high. This gave the Southern leaders a false sense of security, a belief that cotton is king and that they could survive alone. The clouds were gathering. Visualize the dark, heavy skies over the fields of Kansas, bleeding Kansas, where the tension finally broke into violence. The geography of the West was now a battlefield for the future of the American economy. Would it be a land of small, independent farmers or a land of massive plantations? As the 1850s drew to a close, the air felt thick and still, like the moments before a massive summer thunderstorm. The Pony Express began its short, heroic run, riders galloping through the night to keep the East and West connected. But even the fastest horse could not outrun the coming storm. The nation was standing on a precipice. The rise of the railroad, the influx of gold, and the growth of the cities had made America a giant, but it was a giant at war with itself. Feel the heavy, quiet anticipation. The sun is setting on an era of compromise. The tracks are laid, the telegraph is clicking, and the heart of the nation is beating with a frantic, uncertain rhythm. Sleep now, for the story is about to enter its darkest and most transformative chapter.
The Great Fracture and the Iron Suture. As you descend into the deepest levels of rest, imagine a heavy, somber fog rolling over the hills of Pennsylvania and the flat plains of Virginia. The year is 1861. The divided house has finally fractured. The rhythmic pulse of the nation, once a steady march of progress, is now the heavy, syncopated beat of marching boots and the thunder of cannons. The American Civil War was not just a conflict of ideologies, it was a collision of two vastly different economic geographies. Visualize the North, the Union. Its heart beat in the soot-stained brick factories of Lowell and Pittsburgh. The economy here was a total war machine. Imagine the rhythmic clack, clack, clack of sewing machines creating thousands of blue uniforms, and the orange glow of blast furnaces forging miles of new railroad tracks. The North's geography, its deep water ports and dense rail network, became its greatest weapon. In the South, the Confederacy, the rhythm was different. The blockade of the Atlantic coast by the Union Navy was like a slow, tightening grip on a throat. Imagine the silent, empty docks of Charleston and Savannah. The king cotton economy, which relied entirely on global trade, began to wither. Without the ability to export cotton or import salt, lead, and medicine, the Southern economy experienced a catastrophic trough. Inflation spiraled until a loaf of bread cost a handful of nearly worthless paper currency. But even in the darkest hours of the 1860s, the eyes of the nation's leaders were looking far beyond the smoke of the battlefield. In 1862, while the war was at its peak, President Abraham Lincoln signed the Pacific Railway Act. He knew that to save the Union, he had to physically stitch the East to the West. Visualize the two crews working toward each other through the silence of the wilderness. From the west, the Central Pacific struggled through the granite heart of the Sierra Nevada mountains. Imagine the rhythmic tink, tink, tink of hammers on hand drills as Chinese laborers carved tunnels through solid rock in the freezing dark. From the east, the Union Pacific raced across the flat, dusty plains of Nebraska. Finally, imagine the scene at Promontory Summit, Utah in 1869. The war is over. The air is clear. Two steam engines, the Jupiter and the number 119, stand nose to nose. A golden spike is driven into a laurel wood tie. The telegraph flashes a single word across the continent: done. This was the ultimate rise.
The geography of America was no longer a collection of regions, it was a single unified market. A letter that once took months to cross the country now took days. The economy shifted from local to national. The Gilded Age was beginning to dawn. The war had been a terrible fall, a period of immense loss and debt, but the rebuilding, the reconstruction, brought a new, modern financial system. The greenback became a national currency. National banks were established. The nation emerged from the fire of war with a harder, more industrial soul. As you breathe in the cool air of the present, feel the strength of those iron rails beneath the surface of history. They represent the resilience of a land that refused to stay broken. The mountains have been pierced, the plains have been crossed, and the two oceans are finally shaking hands. The night is quiet now. The cannons have long been silent, replaced by the low, distant hum of a train moving across the dark prairie, a steady, reassuring lullaby of a nation that found its way back to itself.
The gilded glow and the pulse of the city. As you drift further into the velvet darkness of sleep, imagine the sky over the American West turning a deep, dusty purple. The year is 1880. The iron rails we laid in the last chapter have brought a new rhythm to the land. This is the era of the Gilded Age, a time when America grew with such ferocious speed that it seemed to glitter like gold, though beneath the surface, the gears of change were grinding hard. Visualize the Great Plains once more. The endless sea of grass is now dotted with the silhouettes of millions of long-horned cattle. This was the age of the cattle kingdom. Imagine the rhythmic thud, thud, thud of thousands of hooves as cowboys drove their herds north along the Chisholm Trail. The geography of the West had become a vast factory of protein, feeding the hungry cities of the East. The cowboy became a symbol of American independence, but the reality was a massive economic machine, a boom that turned dusty railheads like Abilene and Dodge City into bustling centers of silver and leather. But the real transformation was happening in the cities. Imagine the skyline of Chicago or Pittsburgh. The air is heavy with the scent of coal smoke and hot iron. This was the rise of the titans of industry. See Andrew Carnegie in his steel mills, where the rhythmic roar of the Bessemer converter turned molten iron into the steel skeletons of the modern world. See John D. Rockefeller as he organized the flow of oil, the black gold, through a network of pipelines that mimicked the veins of the earth. The economy was no longer a slow-moving river, it was a high-pressure engine. But even as the wealth grew to heights never before seen, the gilded nature of the era showed its cracks. This was a time of massive uprisings and falls. Imagine the quiet, tired faces of the factory workers, living in the shadows of the mansions. The geography of the city was divided, the glowing, electrified main streets and the dark, crowded tenements. Then a flicker of light changed everything. Imagine a laboratory in Menlo Park, New Jersey. The year is 1879. Thomas Edison leans over a glass bulb. The room is silent, save for the ticking of a clock. Suddenly, a tiny carbon filament begins to glow, a soft, warm, steady light. This was not just an invention, it was the death of darkness. The economy of the night was born. No longer was human productivity tied to the rising and setting of the sun. Factories could run through the night, shops could stay open late. The American rhythm shifted again, becoming faster, more constant, more electric. Economically, this era was a roller coaster. The Panic of 1893 was one of the deepest troughs in history. Imagine the silence of the stock exchange as railroads went bankrupt and gold reserves dwindled. It was a reminder that even in an age of steel and light, the nation was still subject to the laws of nature and the cycles of human fear. But look westward one last time in this chapter. The frontier was officially declared closed in 1890. The map was full. The geography was conquered. From the golden wheat fields of Kansas to the redwoods of California, the United States was now a finished masterpiece of territory, connected by wire, rail, and light. As you breathe deeply, feel the warmth of that first light bulb. It is a soft, comforting glow that pushes back the shadows. The nation is no longer a collection of farms. It is an industrial giant, humming with the power of electricity and the ambition of a new century. The night is still, the cities are glowing, and the heart of the world is beginning to beat to an American drum.
The assembly line and the roaring heights. As your mind drifts further into a state of tranquil weightlessness, imagine the morning mist lifting over a brick factory in Detroit, Michigan. The year is 1908. Inside, a new kind of rhythm is being born. Not the frantic pace of a hammer, but the steady, hypnotic beat of the assembly line. Visualize the Ford Model T. For the first time, a complex machine is being put together piece by piece as it moves along a conveyor belt. Click, slide, bolt. Click, slide, bolt. This was more than just a car. It was the birth of the mass economy. Henry Ford realized that if he made the process efficient enough, he could pay his workers enough to buy the very cars they built. The geography of America began to change again. The road trip was born. Imagine the quiet, dusty country lanes slowly turning into paved ribbons of asphalt, connecting small towns to the great pulse of the city. The economy began to soar like a bird catching a warm updraft. We entered the roaring 20s. Picture the jazz age. The air is filled with the faint, rhythmic, brassy notes of a saxophone drifting from a rooftop garden in Manhattan. This was an era of soaring rises. Everything seemed to be going up. Buildings were reaching for the stars. Imagine the construction of the Empire State Building. Men sitting on steel beams hundreds of feet in the air, the rhythmic rat-tat-tat of riveting hammers echoing across the clouds. These skyscrapers were the new mountains of America, symbols of an economy that believed it had finally conquered gravity. In every home, a new box appeared, the radio. Imagine a family sitting in their living room, the warm glow of the vacuum tubes reflecting on their faces. For the first time, the entire nation was listening to the same voice at the same time. This was the standardization of the American soul. From the wheat fields of Iowa to the docks of Boston, everyone knew the same songs and the same news. The economy was fueled by consumerism, the desire for the new, the shiny, and the fast. The stock market was a mountain of paper gold. People believed the trough was a thing of the past. Imagine the flickering ticker tape machines in Wall Street offices, spewing out endless ribbons of rising numbers. It was a dream of infinite growth. But geography has a way of reminding us of balance. While the cities were roaring, the heartland was beginning to suffer. The boom of the war years had led farmers to overplow the delicate grasslands of the Great Plains. The soil, once held down by the deep roots of prairie grass, was now loose and tired. As you breathe slowly and deeply, feel the contrast between the dizzying heights of the New York skyline and the quiet, dry wind beginning to pick up in the Texas Panhandle. The Roaring Twenties were a celebration, a beautiful, neon-lit dance on the edge of a precipice. The music is loud, the lights are bright, and the nation feels invincible. But the sun is setting on this gilded decade. The air is growing thin at these heights. The rhythm of the assembly line is steady, but the rhythm of the market is becoming frantic. Sleep now in the comfort of your room, feeling the steady hum of progress. The world is modern, the world is fast, and for a few more moments of history, the dream remains unbroken.
The dust and the shadowed valley. As the silence of the night grows even heavier, imagine the sky over the Great Plains turning a strange, bruised shade of copper. The year is 1929, moving into the 1930s. The roaring music of the previous decade has faded, replaced by a haunting, hollow whistle of the wind. This is the era of the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl, the deepest trough the American spirit and economy have ever navigated.
Visualize the geography of the Heartland. The lush green prairies we once imagined are now parched. Because of the overplowing and a relentless drought, the soil has turned to fine, dark powder. Imagine a black blizzard, a wall of dust 2 miles high, rolling across Kansas and Oklahoma like a slow-moving mountain of shadow. It blocked out the sun at midday. Inside the small farmhouses, families placed wet sheets over the windows, but the dust still found its way in, coating everything in a fine, gritty layer of despair. Economically, the gilded heights of Wall Street have crumbled. Imagine the silence of the stock exchange floor after the crash. The ticker tape machines, once so frantic, are now still. The economy didn't just fall, it felt as though it had stopped breathing. Banks closed their doors, and life savings vanished like mist in the morning sun. Now imagine the migrant mother. Families packed their lives into rusted Model T Fords, the very cars that symbolized freedom a decade ago, and drove west toward California. They were searching for the promised land, following the rhythmic thrum of tires on Route 66. The geography of the country was shifting again as hundreds of thousands of Okies moved toward the Central Valley, looking for a hand to hold and a job to do. But in the darkness of this trough, a new kind of energy began to stir. Imagine a fireplace in the White House. The year is 1933. Franklin D. Roosevelt sits before a microphone. His voice, calm and steady, travels through the radio waves into millions of homes. These were the fireside chats. He spoke of a New Deal. Visualize the landscape changing under the hands of the Civilian Conservation Corps, CCC. Thousands of young men who once had no work are now in the forests of the West and the parks of the East. Imagine the rhythmic thud of axes and the scrape of shovels. They are planting millions of trees to stop the dust, building trails and carving out the geography of the modern national parks. Then imagine the Tennessee Valley Authority, TVA. In the poorest parts of the South, massive concrete dams began to rise against the rivers. Hear the heavy, low rumble of concrete mixers and the rushing of water. These dams didn't just control floods, they brought electricity to the dark hills of Appalachia. The geography of the South was being electrified, ending the isolation of centuries. The economy was being rebuilt, not from the top down, but from the ground up. It was a slow, painful rise. The alphabet soup of agencies, the WPA, the PWA, created bridges, post offices, and schools that still stand today. The nation was learning that its strength lay in its infrastructure and its shared responsibility. As you breathe in the cool, still air of your room, feel the resilience of this era. The dust eventually settled. The rains eventually returned. The trough was deep, but it taught the nation how to endure. The geography of America was no longer just a resource to be exploited, it was a home to be protected. The night is dark, but the fireside is warm. The nation is resting, gathering its strength for a global challenge that lies just beyond the horizon. The arsenal of democracy and the neon dawn. As you sink deeper into your pillows, let the sounds of the dust storm fade, replaced by a new rhythmic industrial symphony. The year is 1941. The world is at war, and the United States is transforming into the arsenal of democracy. This was an economic rise unlike anything the world had ever seen, a sudden vertical climb out of the Great Depression. Visualize the massive factories of Detroit and California. The assembly lines that once made family cars are now churning out B-24 Liberator bombers and Sherman tanks. Imagine the rhythmic hiss of hydraulic presses and the bright blue sparks of welding torches lighting up the night. Millions of people are moving across the map again, this time to the coasts.
The geography of the American West is being reshaped into a hub of aerospace and shipping. For the first time, the trough of unemployment is completely gone. In its place is a surging, high-pressure economy. Women like the iconic Rosie the Riveter have stepped onto the factory floors, their steady hammers creating a new rhythm for the American workforce. When the war finally ends in 1945, the United States emerges not just as a victor, but as the world's undisputed economic superpower. Now imagine the transition to peace. The soldiers are coming home, and they are looking for a place to build their lives. This leads to the birth of the suburbs. Visualize Levittown. See rows of white fenced houses rising from what used to be potato fields on Long Island. This was a new kind of geography, the suburban sprawl. Hear the soft suburban sounds, the rhythmic click-clack of a lawnmower, the distant shout of children playing in a cul-de-sac, and the hum of a brand new refrigerator. The economy is driven by the GI Bill and the baby boom. Families are buying washing machines, televisions, and station wagons. The American dream has become a tangible, physical reality that you can see in the glowing windows of these new neighborhoods. To connect this new world, imagine the interstate highway system. In 1956, the rhythmic thrum, thrum, thrum of tires on concrete begins to echo across the land. Huge ribbons of gray asphalt are being laid down, bypassing the small towns and connecting the great cities. You can now drive from New York to San Francisco without hitting a single stoplight. The geography of the nation has been shrunk again by speed and efficiency. The economy is stable, predictable, and soaring. This is the era of the golden age of capitalism. Imagine the neon signs of the first fast food restaurants and motels flickering along the highways, symbols of a nation on the move, a nation that values convenience and growth. As you breathe in and out, feel the comfort of this era. The world feels organized, the houses are sturdy, the roads are wide. The great fracture of the past century seems like a distant memory. The United States is at its zenith, a land of chrome, glass, and infinite suburban horizons. The night is calm, the streetlights are humming, and the nation is dreaming of a future that stretches out like a perfectly paved highway under a clear, starlit sky.
The silver spire and the silicon seed. As you float deeper into the stillness of the night, imagine the air turning cool and thin, as if you are rising above the suburban rooftops. The year is 1961. The steady, earthbound rhythm of the highway is suddenly interrupted by a powerful, bone-shaking roar. This is the era of the space race. Visualize a silver rocket standing on a launch pad in Cape Canaveral, Florida. Around it, the humid marshes are silent, waiting. Then, with a blinding flash of white light, the geography of the American frontier expands beyond the clouds. The economy is no longer just about land and sea. It is about the high ground of science and technology. Imagine the thousands of engineers in white shirts and narrow ties, their slide rules clicking in a rhythmic cadence, calculating the trajectory to the moon. This massive federal investment in the Cold War era acted as a hidden engine for the economy. It wasn't just about the moon, it was about the miniature components needed to get there. In a quiet, fruit orchard-filled valley in Northern California, something small and revolutionary was taking root. This was the birth of Silicon Valley. Imagine the silicon seed, the integrated circuit. Instead of massive, room-sized vacuum tubes, the power of a computer was being etched onto a tiny sliver of sand. The economy was shifting from the heavy metal of the steel mills to the invisible logic of the microchip. Visualize the quiet, clean rooms of the early tech companies, where the only sound was the soft hum of air filtration systems. This was a new kind of gold rush, where the gold was made of data and the miners were programmers. But as the rockets soared, the geography of American society was once again in a state of uprising.
Imagine the streets of Washington, D.C., Selma, and Chicago. The rhythm of the 1960s was a turbulent one, the sound of marching feet and the echoes of powerful speeches demanding civil rights. The economy was forced to look at itself in the mirror. The Great Society programs aimed to bridge the gap between the gleaming skyscrapers and the forgotten corners of poverty. Then the 1970s brought a sudden cold fall. Visualize the long lines of cars at gas stations. The oil crisis was a reminder that even a superpower is tethered to the geography of the Middle East. The rhythmic flow of cheap energy stopped, and for the first time since the Great Depression, the nation felt the sting of stagflation. The Rust Belt began to form as the old steel mills of the North, the ones that won the war, began to grow silent and cold. Yet in the darkness of the trough, the personal computer was born. Imagine Steve Jobs and Bill Gates in their garages, the clicking of keyboards replacing the sound of the assembly line. The economy was decentralizing, the information age was dawning, and the United States was positioning itself as the brain of the global body. As you breathe slowly, feel the transition from the heavy industrial past to the light digital future. The nation is learning that power is not just in the muscle of the factory, but in the spark of the idea. The stars above are no longer distant lights, they are destinations. The orchards of California have become the temples of technology. The night is vast and filled with data. The satellites are whispering overhead, and the American story is preparing to enter the world of the infinite, the world of the web. The digital frontier and the global pulse. As your breathing slows to a deep, rhythmic pace, imagine the 1980s dawning with a bright, neon-colored energy. The air is no longer thick with coal smoke, it feels electric, vibrating with the sound of early synthesizers and the rapid-fire ticking of a new kind of clock, the stock ticker. Visualize the bull market of the 80s. On Wall Street, the geography of wealth has moved from the physical factory to the abstract world of finance. Imagine the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, a sea of bright jackets and shouting voices, where the rhythmic waving of arms signals the movement of millions. This was the era of big finance. The economy was deregulating, breaking old chains and soaring towards a new peak. The yuppie culture emerged, young professionals in the glass towers of Manhattan and Charlotte, their lives measured by the rising numbers on a glowing green screen. But as the towers of finance grew taller, the geography of the Heartland continued to shift. The Rust Belt was now a reality. Imagine the quiet, hollowed-out hulls of the great steel mills in Youngstown and Gary. The fall of the old industry was a somber lullaby for a generation of workers. However, a new rise was happening in the Sun Belt. Millions were moving to Phoenix, Atlanta, and Dallas. The invention of widespread air conditioning had conquered the geography of the South and West, turning sweltering deserts into thriving metropolises. Then the 1990s arrived, bringing with them the sound that would change the world forever, the screech and hiss of a dial-up modem. Visualize the birth of the World Wide Web. Suddenly, the geography of the United States was no longer measured in miles, but in milliseconds. Information was flowing through fiber optic cables buried deep in the earth, bypassing mountains and oceans. This was the dot-com boom. Imagine the excitement in the coffee shops of San Francisco and Seattle, where young dreamers were building virtual empires like Amazon and eBay. The economy was becoming globalized. A toy designed in California was now made in a factory in Asia and shipped back through the massive ports of Long Beach and Savannah. This era felt like an endless summer. The Cold War had ended, the Berlin Wall had fallen, and for a moment the United States stood as the sole superpower in a world that seemed to be becoming one giant marketplace. The rhythm was fast, optimistic, and digital. But every rise eventually meets a horizon. As the year 1999 turned into 2000, a quiet anxiety settled over the land, the Y2K fear. It was a reminder of how dependent we had become on the silent, invisible logic of the computer. The dot-com bubble eventually burst, a sharp trough that cleared away the excess but left the digital infrastructure behind, ready for the next chapter. As you breathe out, feel the immense connectivity of this modern world. You are lying in a room that is connected to the entire planet by invisible waves. The geography of the nation has expanded into the cloud. The old rivers of water and the old tracks of iron have been joined by rivers of light and tracks of data. The night is humming with the quiet energy of a billion servers. The world is smaller, faster, and more intertwined than ever before. Sleep now, knowing that the pulse of the nation is now the pulse of the world, beating in a complex digital harmony.
The Great Reset and the Green Horizon. As you drift into the quietest layers of your sleep, the story moves into the 21st century, a time of rapid shifts, deep shadows, and unexpected light. The year is 2008. The steady, confident rhythm of the previous decade is suddenly interrupted by a profound silence. This is the Great Recession. Visualize the geography of the American suburbs once more. The construction sites that were once humming with the sound of saws and hammers have grown quiet. The housing bubble has burst. Imagine the trough, a period of quiet anxiety as families across the nation stared at the flickering screens of their televisions, watching the names of century-old banks disappear from the skyline of Wall Street. It was a moment where the economy had to stop, breathe, and rethink its foundation. But as the old systems were being repaired, a new invisible geography was taking over. This was the rise of the smartphone and social media. Imagine the world in the palm of your hand. The rhythm of life shifted from the evening news to the instant, constant stream of the feed. The economy began to prioritize access over ownership. Companies like Uber and Airbnb transformed the geography of the city and the home into a shared marketplace. The American worker became a gig worker, moving through the city with the rhythmic guidance of a GPS. Now imagine the changing face of the American landscape. If you were to fly over the plains of Texas or the deserts of California today, you would see a new kind of forest. Thousands of white wind turbines stand like silent giants, their blades turning in a slow, hypnotic, rhythmic dance. Huge blankets of blue solar panels soak up the desert sun. This is the green energy revolution. Economically, the nation is moving from the carbon age to the electron age. Imagine the quiet, powerful hum of electric vehicles moving through the streets of Seattle and Austin. The geography of the oil patch is being joined by the geography of the battery belt. It is a massive rise, a pivot toward a future that tries to balance the growth of the nation with the health of the land. The 2020s brought the most sudden fall and rise in history. Imagine the silence of the great cities during the lockdowns, a moment of global stillness. But look at how quickly the rhythm returned. The digital transformation accelerated. Remote work changed the geography of the office forever. People began moving away from the crowded coasts and back into the quiet beauty of the Rocky Mountains and the Appalachian foothills, taking their jobs with them through the air. As you breathe deeply now, feel the immense complexity of this modern era. The United States is no longer just a country of steel and soil. It is a country of code, of wind, and of a diverse, interconnected people. The geography of the nation has become a map of resilience. From the redwoods of the west to the salt marshes of the east, the land is still here, breathing with us. The night is deep. The satellites are still whispering. The wind turbines are turning in the dark, generating power for a tomorrow we are only beginning to imagine. The story of America is not finished. It is a living, breathing cycle of rising and falling, always searching for the next horizon.
Sleep now in the peace of this vast, enduring land. You are part of the story, and for tonight, the story is at rest. The ancient whispers of the Appalachians. As you drift further into the embrace of sleep, let us step away from the timelines of men and machines. Imagine yourself standing at the foot of the Appalachian Mountains. These are not the jagged, angry peaks of the young West. These are the world's elders. Hundreds of millions of years old, their edges have been softened by time, rounded by the gentle, persistent hands of wind and rain. Visualize the Blue Ridge Parkway at twilight. A soft indigo mist, the famous blue smoke, clings to the hollows between the ridges. The geography here is a labyrinth of deep valleys and ancient forests. This is the heart of Appalachia, a place where the economy was once built on the silence of the woods and the dark treasures hidden beneath the roots of trees. Hear the rhythmic sound of a mountain stream. It is a constant, bubbling lullaby, moving over smooth river stones that have been there since before the first map was ever drawn. In these hills, life once moved at the pace of the seasons. The rise and fall here weren't measured by stock tickers, but by the harvest of ginseng, the felling of timber, and the slow extraction of coal. Imagine the small mountain cabins, their chimneys breathing wood smoke into the cool night air. The economy of these hollows was one of deep self-reliance. People made their own music on banjos and fiddles, rhythmic, haunting melodies that echoed the Celtic and African roots of the settlers. This music was the currency of the soul, a way to tell the story of a hard life lived in a beautiful land. Now imagine the deep, dark veins of coal. For over a century, the rhythm of this region was the clink, clink, clink of the miner's pick and the heavy rumble of coal trains winding through the narrow gaps. This was the fuel that built the American empire, a massive economic contribution that came at a great cost. As the world turns toward the sun and wind for power, these mountains are finding a new silence. The old mines are closing, and the land is beginning to reclaim itself. The geography is shifting from industry to restoration. Visualize the Appalachian Trail, a thin brown thread stretching over 2,000 miles. People from all over the world come here to walk, to slow down, and to match their heartbeat to the rhythm of the trail. The economy is now one of preservation. The wealth is found in the biodiversity, the salamanders in the damp moss, the soaring hawks in the updrafts, and the ancient spirit of the forest. As you breathe in, smell the damp earth and the scent of wild ramps and pine. The Appalachians teach us about the beauty of age. They show us that even the highest peaks eventually become gentle hills, and that there is a quiet power in enduring through the eons. The mist is thickening now, wrapping the mountains in a soft, protective blanket. The cabins are dark, the streams are singing, and the oldest mountains in the world are watching over your sleep. The bayou's breath and the delta's song. As your mind continues to wander through the vast landscape of the American story, imagine the air growing warmer and heavier, thick with the scent of jasmine and damp earth. You're drifting toward the deep south, where the geography is defined by the slow, winding path of the water. Visualize the Mississippi Delta. This is a land born of the river's patience, a flat, fertile expanse created by millions of years of silt carried from the heart of the continent. The soil here is so dark and rich, it feels like velvet. Historically, this was the engine of the cotton economy, a place of immense agricultural rise and profound human struggle. Hear the rhythmic sound of the cicadas in the heat of a summer afternoon, a steady, buzzing pulse that defines the southern silence. In the fields, the economy was once measured by the weight of a bale and the length of a furrow. But from the hardship of the soil came a different kind of wealth, the blues. Imagine the rhythmic stomp and slide of a guitar on a wooden porch in Mississippi. This music, born from the geography of the Delta, became the foundation of the world's modern soundtrack. It was a cultural export that proved more enduring than any crop. Now, move deeper south into the Louisiana bayou. Imagine the Spanish moss hanging like silver lace from the ancient cypress trees. The water here doesn't flow, it breathes. The rhythm is slow and tidal. Here, the geography created a Cajun and Creole economy based on the bounty of the swamp, shrimp, crawfish, and timber. Visualize the small wooden boats or pirogues gliding silently through the duckweed, leaving only a ripple behind. Economically, this region has experienced dramatic falls and rises. The discovery of oil and gas beneath the marshes brought a modern industrial pulse to the quiet wetlands. Huge steel platforms rose from the Gulf of Mexico, tethered to the geography of the prehistoric seabed. This brought prosperity, but also the challenge of protecting a fragile ecosystem. The New South is now a hub of aerospace and automotive manufacturing. From the rocket engines built in Alabama to the car plants in South Carolina, the rhythm has shifted from the plow to the precision machine. Yet the geography remains a place of deep tradition. The rise of the modern southern city, Atlanta, Charlotte, Nashville, is balanced by the quiet, unchanging pace of the rural backroads. As you breathe in the humid, sweet air, imagine a paddle wheeler moving slowly down the river at midnight. Its lights reflect on the dark water, and the sound of its engines is a low, comforting thrum. This is a land that knows how to hold its history and its mysteries close to the chest. The magnolias are in bloom, the river is wide and deep, and the spirit of the South is a warm breeze that lulls you into a peaceful, heavy sleep.
The red silence and the desert soul. As you drift further into the sanctuary of sleep, the humid air of the South begins to thin and cool. You are traveling westward, crossing the 100th meridian into the vast, arid heart of the American Southwest. The geography here is a masterpiece of light and stone, a place where the Earth's ancient history is laid bare in layers of red, orange, and purple rock. Imagine yourself standing on the rim of the Grand Canyon just as the sun begins to dip below the horizon. The silence here is not empty, it is a heavy, resonant presence. Below you, the Colorado River, a thin silver thread from this height, continues its million-year-old task of carving through the crust of the planet. This is a geography that hums with the rhythm of deep time. The economy of the Southwest has always been a battle for the most precious currency of all, water. In this dry land, the rise of civilization was only possible through incredible engineering. Visualize the Hoover Dam, a massive, curved wall of white concrete wedged between the dark canyon walls of the Nevada-Arizona border. Hear the low, subterranean vibration of the great turbines. This dam turned the wild Colorado into a controlled engine of growth, providing the electricity and water that allowed cities like Las Vegas and Phoenix to bloom in the middle of the desert. But before the dams and the neon lights, there were the ancestral Puebloans and the Navajo Nation. Imagine the ancient cliff dwellings of Mesa Verde carved directly into the sandstone alcoves. The economy here was one of profound harmony, growing corn, beans, and squash in a land that seemed to offer nothing. The rhythm of life was dictated by the summer monsoons and the movements of the stars. Today, the Southwest remains a spiritual geography, where the red rocks of Sedona and the towering buttes of Monument Valley remind us of a world that existed long before the concept of a market. In the modern era, the Southwest has experienced a technological rise. The clear, dry skies made it the perfect home for the aerospace and defense industries. From the secret laboratories of Los Alamos to the sprawling Air Force bases of New Mexico, the desert became a landscape of innovation. Yet, the geography remains fragile. The fall in this region is often marked by drought and the shrinking of Lake Mead, a reminder that nature ultimately holds the ledger. As you breathe in the crisp, dry air, smell the faint scent of sagebrush and parched earth. Imagine the desert at night. The sky is a dark velvet canopy, crowded with stars so bright they seem to pulse. There are no city lights here to dim them. The temperature drops, and the rocks begin to release the heat they gathered during the day, a soft warmth that radiates from the ground. The coyotes are singing their jagged, rhythmic songs to the moon. The canyons are deep and still. The desert is a place of infinite space and eternal patience, inviting you to let go of the small worries of the day and sink into its ancient, starlit peace.
The Emerald Canopy and the Volcanic Heart. As you leave the dry, red silence of the desert, imagine a cool, damp breeze beginning to brush against your skin. You are traveling north and west toward the Pacific Northwest, a land of mist, moss, and monumental beauty. Here, the geography is defined by the struggle between the deep blue of the Pacific and the jagged volcanic peaks of the Cascade Range. Visualize the Olympic Peninsula. This is a place where the forest doesn't just grow, it breathes. The air is thick with the scent of cedar and Douglas fir. This is one of the few temperate rainforests in the world. Imagine the rhythmic drip, drip, drip of rainwater falling from the canopy of ancient trees, some hundreds of feet tall, onto a floor of neon green moss. Historically, the economy of this region was built on the green gold of timber. The sound of the cross-cut saw and the heavy rumble of logging trucks were the heartbeat of small towns from Coos Bay to Port Angeles. Now, look toward the horizon at the Ring of Fire. The geography here is powerful and unpredictable. Imagine the towering, snow-capped cone of Mount Rainier standing like a silent guardian over the Puget Sound. But remember the fall of Mount St. Helens in 1980, a reminder that the land itself is alive and capable of sudden, massive transformation. This volcanic soil, though born of fire, became the foundation for a rich agricultural rise in the valleys, where berries, hops, and apples grow in rhythmic abundance. In the modern era, the Pacific Northwest has shifted from a resource economy to a knowledge economy. Visualize the mist-covered hills of Seattle and Bellevue. This is the kingdom of the innovators. The rhythm has changed from the felling of trees to the clicking of keys and the brewing of espresso. Companies like Microsoft, Amazon, and Boeing have turned this remote corner of the map into a global center of commerce. The rise of the tech giants has brought a new kind of wealth, turning Seattle's skyline into a forest of glass and steel, dominated by the iconic Space Needle. But even with the rise of the machines, the spirit of the Northwest is tethered to the water. Imagine the Puget Sound at dawn. The ferries move back and forth in a slow, rhythmic dance, connecting the islands to the mainland. The economy of the sea remains, from the salmon runs that the indigenous peoples have protected for millennia to the massive container ships carrying goods to the markets of Asia. As you breathe in the cool, oxygen-rich air, feel the freshness of the mist. Imagine yourself sitting by a fire in a coastal cabin, listening to the rhythmic roar of the Pacific waves crashing against the rugged haystack rocks. The sound is steady, powerful, and deeply grounding. The eagles are roosting in the high branches. The fog is rolling in from the ocean, erasing the boundaries between the sea and the sky. The Northwest is a land of secrets and shadows, inviting you to tuck yourself into its cool green embrace and drift into a deep restorative sleep. The inland oceans and the industrial heartbeat. As you settle deeper into your rest, imagine the scent of rain-washed stone and the cool, vast expanse of fresh water. You are drifting toward the Great Lakes, the third coast of the American continent. These are not mere lakes, they are inland oceans, Superior, Michigan, Huron, Erie, and Ontario, holding 1/5 of the world's surface freshwater. Visualize the shore of Lake Superior. The water is a deep, cold sapphire, and the rhythm of the waves hitting the rugged cliffs is slower and more powerful than a river. Historically, this geography was the gateway to the heart of the nation's wealth. Beneath the soil of the Iron Range in Minnesota lay the red earth that would become the steel of the 20th century. Imagine the massive ore boats, hundreds of feet long, sliding silently through the morning fog toward the locks of Sault Ste. Marie. This geography created a unique economic rise. The lakes were the liquid highway that connected the mines of the north to the factories of the south. Visualize Chicago, a city built on the rhythm of the railroad and the lakefront. It became the nation's lungs, breathing in the cattle and grain of the West and breathing out the manufactured goods of the East. Hear the distant rhythmic clatter of the L train as it snakes through the skyscrapers, a sound that has defined the city's pulse for over 100 years. Further east, imagine the rhythmic hum of Detroit, the Motor City. In the mid-20th century, this was the highest octane economy in the world. The geography of the Great Lakes allowed for the easy movement of coal, iron, and rubber. But then came the fall. Visualize the quiet, echoing halls of the old Packard plant or the empty streets of the 1980s. The Rust Belt was a hard lesson in the cycles of global trade. The economy went through a deep, shivering trough where the silence was heavy with the memory of better times. But the Great Lakes are a landscape of rebirth. Today, the rhythm is changing again. Imagine the transformation of the Pittsburgh riverfront or the midtown of Detroit. The old warehouses are now lofts. The old factories are now hubs for robotics, healthcare, and green technology. The economy is becoming blue, focused on the preservation and management of the very water that gave it life. The Great Lakes also offer a profound stillness. Imagine the Mackinac Island at night. Here, the rhythm of the 19th century still lives. No cars are allowed, only the rhythmic clop, clop, clop of horse-drawn carriages and the soft whir of bicycle tires. It is a place where time slows down to the pace of a summer breeze. As you breathe in the crisp, clean air of the lakes, feel the immensity of the water around you. It is a vast, cooling presence that settles the mind. The lighthouses are blinking their slow, rhythmic warnings across the dark water. The freighter whistles echo in the distance, a low, comforting bass note in the night. The lakes are vast, the cities are dreaming, and the industrial heart is beating with a new, quiet, and steady purpose. Sleep now, held by the strength of the fresh water and the resilience of the heartland.
The golden horizon and the heartland's breath. As you drift further into the stillness, imagine the world opening up. The hills have flattened, the trees have thinned, and you are standing in the center of the continent, the Great Plains. This is the American heartland, a geography defined by the infinite sky and the rhythmic swaying of 1 billion stalks of grain. Visualize the breadbasket of the world. In the summer, the landscape is a patchwork quilt of emerald green and burnished gold. The economy here is one of scale and patience. Imagine the rhythmic thrum of a combine harvester moving across a sea of wheat in Kansas or Nebraska. This is a machine that does the work of 1,000 men, a symbol of the industrial rise of the American farm. The grain flows from the fields into massive concrete silos, the cathedrals of the plains, which stand tall against the flat horizon like sentinels of stability. The geography of the Heartland is a lesson in resilience. Historically, this land knew the fall of the Dust Bowl, but it learned to heal. Today, the economy is shifting from the soil to the sky. Imagine the vast wind farms of Iowa and the Dakotas. Thousands of white turbines stretch across the horizon, their blades moving in a slow, synchronized, rhythmic pulse. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. They are harvesting the invisible river of wind that has blown across these plains since the beginning of time. Hear the distant, rhythmic whistle of a freight train. On the plains, the sound carries for miles. These trains are the lifelines of the interior, miles-long chains of steel carrying the harvest to the ports of the world. The rhythm of the train, clickety-clack, is the heartbeat of the small towns that dot the landscape. These are towns where life moves at a human pace, where the main street still echoes with the quiet greetings of neighbors. Economically, the Heartland is undergoing a digital rise. High-speed cables now run beneath the old wagon trails, allowing a farmer in a tractor to monitor global market prices in real time. But despite the technology, the soul of the land remains tethered to the weather. The rise and fall here are dictated by the spring rains and the autumn frosts. There is a deep, grounding peace in knowing that some things are still governed by the ancient laws of nature. As you breathe slowly, imagine the plains at night. Because there are no mountains to block your view, the sky feels twice as large as anywhere else. The stars don't just twinkle, they blaze. You can see the arc of the Milky Way stretching from one horizon to the other. The wind has died down to a soft whisper, cooling the earth after a long day of sun. The crickets are chirping in a steady, hypnotic rhythm in the tall grass. The cattle are sleeping in the dark pastures. The vastness of the land is not empty, it is a full, quiet embrace. You are in the heart of the country, where the earth is steady and the sky is infinite. Sleep now under the watchful eyes of the stars as the Heartland breathes with you in a slow, peaceful cadence. The spine of the continent and the silver shadow. As you leave the flat, steady pulse of the plains, imagine the horizon beginning to buckle and rise. The ground beneath you tilts upward as you approach the Rocky Mountains, the spine of the continent. This is a geography of jagged granite, turquoise lakes, and thin, crystalline air that makes every breath feel like a renewal. Visualize the rise of the Rockies. Unlike the gentle Appalachians, these mountains are young and restless. They were pushed up by the immense pressure of tectonic plates, a slow-motion collision that created a wall of stone stretching from New Mexico to the Arctic. Historically, this was a geography of barriers. Imagine the early pioneers in their covered wagons looking up at the continental divide, the point where water decides whether to flow toward the Atlantic or the Pacific. The economy of the Rockies was born in the dark. Imagine the silver boom of the late 1800s. Towns like Leadville and Aspen exploded into existence overnight. Hear the rhythmic clink, clink, clink of hammers on hand drills and the muffled thud of dynamite deep within the earth. Men pulled fortunes in silver and gold from the cold heart of the mountains. This was a boom of incredible intensity, creating silver kings who built opera houses in the wilderness. But as the silver veins ran dry, the fall was just as sudden. Imagine the ghost towns, wooden storefronts and abandoned mine shafts left to the wind and the snow. The economy of the mountains had to find a new rhythm. Today, that rhythm is one of recreation and preservation. The wealth is no longer what is taken out of the mountain, but the mountain itself. Visualize the powder days in Vale or Telluride. The economy is now driven by the rhythmic swish-swish of skis on fresh snow and the hum of chairlifts rising through the pines. The geography has become a sanctuary for the modern world. Imagine the silence of Rocky Mountain National Park in the winter, a silence so deep you can hear your own heartbeat. The Rockies also serve as the nation's water tower. Imagine the snowpack high on the peaks. This frozen reservoir is the lifeblood of the West. As it melts in the spring, it fuels the rhythmic rush of the Colorado and the Rio Grande. The economy of millions of people downstream depends on the slow seasonal pulse of the mountain thaw. As you breathe in the cool, thin air, feel the stillness of the high altitude. Imagine yourself in a timber-framed lodge, sitting by a massive stone fireplace. Outside, the wind is whistling through the crags of Long's Peak, but inside, it is warm and quiet. The scent of pine resin and wood smoke fills the room. The elk are moving through the subalpine meadows in a slow, rhythmic gait. The stars feel close enough to touch, hanging just above the jagged peaks. The mountains are a monument to endurance, a place where time is measured in eras rather than hours. The peaks are glowing silver in the moonlight. The valleys are filled with shadow. The spine of the continent is steady and strong, inviting you to rest your weight against its ancient stone and drift into a deep, high mountain sleep. The granite coast and the colonial echo. As the high mountain air of the Rockies fades, imagine the scent of the atmosphere changing. It grows salt-tinged, crisp and sharp with the smell of pine needles and cold Atlantic spray. You are drifting toward the American Northeast, specifically the rugged, storied shores of New England. This is a geography defined by the meeting of the ancient Appalachian granite and the relentless rhythmic gray of the North Atlantic. Visualize the coast of Maine. It is a fractured landscape of hidden coves, jagged cliffs, and drowned valleys. Unlike the sandy beaches of the South, this coast is a battleground of stone. Historically, the economy here was carved out of the sea and the forest. Imagine the rhythmic thud of the shipbuilder's mallet in the yards of Bath or Portsmouth. For centuries, the great pines of the interior became the masts of the world's greatest sailing ships. The economy was built on the golden age of sail, a time when New England captains traded ice, timber, and salt across every ocean on the map. Hear the rhythmic, lonely tolling of a bell buoy in the distance, cling, clang, marking the path through the morning fog. This is the soundtrack of the seafaring life. Imagine the lobstermen of today heading out into the pre-dawn dark. Hear the steady, low chug, chug, chug of their diesel engines as they navigate the rocky shallows. The economy of the lobster coast is a dance with the tides, a resilient tradition that has survived the rise and fall of industrial eras. Now move inland toward the historic heart of Boston. The geography here is a palimpsest, layers of history written one over the other. Imagine the rise of the Industrial Revolution in the Merrimack Valley. Hear the hypnotic, rhythmic clatter-clack-clatter of thousands of looms in the brick textile mills of Lowell. This was the first true boom of the American factory system, a time when the power of falling water was harnessed to clothe a growing nation. Today, the old economy of textiles and shoes has given way to the brainpower economy. Visualize the halls of Harvard and MIT. The geography of the Northeast is now defined by its density of knowledge. The rhythm has shifted from the mechanical loom to the digital laboratory. The rise of biotechnology and robotics in the Kendall Square area have turned these colonial cobblestones into a launchpad for the future. Yet the past is never far away. You can still hear the rhythmic tolling of the bells at Old North Church, reminding the city of its revolutionary soul. As you breathe in the cool Atlantic air, feel the stability of the granite beneath you. Imagine yourself in a white shingled cottage on Cape Cod. Outside, the wind is rustling the beach grass, and the rhythmic roar of the surf is a constant, soothing presence. The light from a nearby lighthouse sweeps across your ceiling in a slow, predictable, rhythmic arc, a silent guardian in the night. The harbors are full of sleeping boats, their masts swaying slightly in the tide. The colonial chimneys are cold, and the woods are still. New England is a land of memory and innovation, a place that knows how to weather any storm. The ocean is vast, the history is deep, and the granite is steady. Drift away now, lulled by the rhythmic pulse of the tide and the quiet strength of the northern shore.
The schist in the sky, Manhattan's pulse. As you drift toward the final stages of rest, imagine the landscape shifting from the quiet New England coast to the most electric geography on Earth. You are arriving at the narrow island of Manhattan. But before you see the lights, feel the ground. Beneath the asphalt and the subways lies a foundation of Manhattan schist, a glittering, ancient bedrock so strong it allows the city to reach for the clouds. Visualize the rise of the skyline. The geography of New York City is a vertical frontier. Historically, the economy of this island was built on its deep water harbor, the meeting point of the Hudson River and the Atlantic. Imagine the rhythmic slap, slap, slap of water against the wooden piers of South Street Seaport in the 1800s. This was the Empire City, where the wealth of the Erie Canal met the capital of Europe. The economy of New York is a symphony of rhythms. Imagine the financial district at dawn, the rhythmic click-clack of thousands of shoes on the sidewalk as the world's financial heartbeat begins to accelerate. On Wall Street, the geography is measured in floors, the trading floor, the boardroom, the vault. This is the rise and fall in its most literal sense, where a single day can see the birth of a fortune or the end of an era. Now, move your mind underground. Hear the low, rhythmic rumble of the subway. It is the city's nervous system, moving millions of people through the dark schist in a constant subterranean pulse. This infrastructure created the Great Influx. Imagine the waves of immigrants arriving at Ellis Island, their hopes and dreams becoming the very mortar of the city's bricks. The economy of New York is a mosaic economy, built by the hands of the world, from the garment workers at the Lower East Side to the tech innovators of Silicon Alley. But as the sun sets, a different rhythm takes over. Visualize Times Square. It is a geography of light. The massive digital screens create a massive flickering that can be seen from space. This is the center of the universe, a testament to the American rise into the age of media and spectacle. Yet, even here, there is a balance. Imagine the quiet, shadowed canyons of Central Park, 843 acres of green lung breathing in the center of the iron and glass. Today, the city is evolving again. The rise of the Hudson Yards and the revitalized waterfronts shows a city that refuses to be static. The geography is being reclaimed for parks and walks, a green rise that softens the hard edges of the metropolis. The rhythm is becoming more sustainable, more human. As you breathe in the cool night air of the city, feel the vibration of the world far below. Imagine yourself in a high-floor apartment looking out over the sea of lights. The city is a vast, glowing circuit board. The rhythmic sweeping of car headlights on the bridge, the distant muffled siren, and the steady hum of the building's ventilation, it all blends into a white noise lullaby. The lights of the Empire State Building are a steady, comforting glow. The harbor is a dark, silent mirror. The city that never sleeps is, for this moment, a place of profound peace. The bedrock is solid. The sky is vast. The pulse of the world is steady and sure. You are part of the great American tapestry, safe and at rest in the heart of the dream. The infinite horizon and the next century. As you drift toward the final, most profound state of sleep,
Imagine the lights of Manhattan fading into a soft celestial glow. The geography we have traversed, the mountains, the plains, the rivers, and the cities, is now a tapestry beneath you. But the American story does not stop at the shoreline or the skyscraper's tip. It is reaching for a new, infinite horizon. Visualize the year 2026 and beyond. The rise of the nation is now taking place in the world of the invisible and the interplanetary. Imagine the quiet, sterile labs where quantum computers are being built. Here, the rhythm is not mechanical, it is atomic. The economy is shifting into a deep tech era where problems once unsolvable, the mysteries of biology, the complexities of the climate, are being decoded at the speed of light. Now look up at the night sky. The rhythmic pulsing of satellites is no longer just for communication, it is the infrastructure for a cislunar economy. Imagine the first permanent bases on the moon, where American engineers and scientists are learning to live off the land of another world. The geography of the United States has expanded into the final frontier. This is the ultimate boom, the beginning of a transition where the resources of the asteroid belt and the research of the lunar plains become the new gold rush of the 21st century. Closer to home, visualize the Great Restoration. The geography of the continent is being rewilded. Imagine the return of the bison to the plains in numbers not seen for 2 centuries. Hear the rhythmic, heavy thud of their hooves on the prairie, a sound that was once nearly lost. The economy is finding a steady state, where the rise is measured not just in dollars, but in the health of the soil, the clarity of the water, and the resilience of the forest. As you breathe in the cool, silent air of the future, feel the transition to the age of intelligence. AI is becoming the new electric grid, a silent, rhythmic assistant that helps manage the flow of energy from the sun and the wind, optimizing the movement of goods and the health of every citizen. The trough of human drudgery is being filled with a rise in creativity and connection. Imagine the American landscape 100 years from now. The cities are vertical forests, the highways are silent ribbons of light, and the small towns have been revitalized by the ability to work from anywhere. The divided house of the past is being mended by a shared goal, the stewardship of the earth and the exploration of the stars. The rhythm of the nation is now a long, slow, and confident breath. The rise and fall of history has taught us that the land is enduring, the people are resilient, and the horizon is always moving forward. As you sink into the deepest sleep, imagine yourself floating above the continent. From the Atlantic to the Pacific, the lights are dimming, the engines are cooling, and the land is at rest. The ancient mountains, the fertile valleys, and the glowing cities are all part of one magnificent living organism. The story is long, the story is beautiful, and for tonight, the story is complete. The stars are silent, the earth is steady, the future is a warm, beckoning glow. Sleep now, your journey is done. This concludes the American Sleep Story. I hope this journey through geography and economy has been both insightful and deeply relaxing. If you ever wish to explore another chapter or a different landscape, I will be here. Good night.
History is full of secrets, and we are just getting started. If you enjoyed this journey, make sure to hit the like button. It really helps the channel. What part of this story surprised you the most? Tell me in the comments. And if you haven't already, subscribe and turn on notifications so you're always the first to join us for our next deep dive. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.